The 2021 film False Positive was produced by Hulu. It was directed by John Lee. Screenplay was by Ilana Glazer, who also starred in the film. The original story was by Alyssa Studding. Running time is 1 hour and 33 minutes. It also starred Justin Theroux, Pierce Brosnan, and Gretchen Mol. My thesis statement goes as follows. At its face, False Positive critiques men's forced and involuntary influence on reproductive rights. However, a closer look sees that it is actually a modern critique on the control men exert on women's agency to control their own bodies and reproductive rights when legal rights are not taken away. There are two really important aspects to this, which is women's agency and legal rights. Woman's agency, as defined by Elisabeth Pacherie. We are perceivers, we are thinkers, we are also agents, bringing about physical events such as bodily movements and their consequences. What we do tells us and others a lot about who we are, and who we are determines what we do. So keep that in mind as we move throughout the rest of the film. The second part is the legal rights. What is the climate in which this movie was created?
The Texas Supreme Court weighing in on the state's near-total ban on abortion today.
Fight over Florida's new abortion bill is well underway.
Now win in court by successfully suing anyone who helps a woman get an abortion after 6 weeks.
President Joe Biden, a Catholic, reaffirmed his support for Roe v. Wade. From day one of his administration, the president has sought to codify Roe into law, and he's pushed back against measures like the Texas heartbeat law.
Yet, False Positive does not talk about this political climate, the rule of law, or legal rights at all. It's implicit, and maybe at the very end it's talked about slightly, but this is a critique on how men influence women's self-agency through ways which are currently legal, through current legal institutions, mainly marriage and healthcare. So what has been the reception of this movie? Well, I'll say not good. I have three of the biggest critiques of this film present. The first is by Tamri Lafley. They seem to only scratch the surface of their queries and narrative goals. This is coupled by the second review, which is, I don't understand it. This is the top review on IMDb. I don't really understand the plot. The story has the premise of a mystery thriller, but it's confusing. Questions aren't answered. Hand-holding is prevalent and also not prevalent in this movie, and a lot is up for interpretation. The last, this is by New York Times' author Beatrice Loaiza, but Lee and Glazer were toying between the impulse to satirize the upper-crust Malou that would be parents and the desire to depict a complex mental breakdown, unleash a watered-down and occasionally contradictory critique of, well, just about everything. Now, these are two stars on the movie Broad City, and it seems like they can't get away from the outside impact of that force. So the first point to go to my thesis statement is, how do men exert power over Lucy's body? The first is through the idea of reciprocity and gifts. Her husband Adrian gifts her this Cartier love bracelet, which, noted as a symbol, can't be taken off without the help of another person. He then uses this and expects reciprocity, and then goes on to rape her. And now this fuzzy scene isn't talked about again, but she's obviously not liking it. And so the interpretation there, in my view, is that even within a relationship, there is this expectation that a woman will perform sex. The Theory of Reciprocity by Serge-Christophe says that someone who receives a gift will often feel the urge or envy to reciprocate with the return gift. And you can see that throughout the clips in this film.
No. She's out cold.
In this clip, it is the illegal part of it. Men, in this case the surgeon, Dr. Hindle, took out the wrong fetus, aborted the wrong fetus, aborted the girl and not the twin boys, which she wanted to keep. Another is drugs. She gives her Xanax so that and these physical chemicals will affect her decisions.
I'm just not comfortable with Grace. Dr. Hill gives me a bad feeling.
In this scene, Lucy's trying to tell her husband Adrian she wants a midwife.
No. I have to draw the line somewhere.
Well, not around my birth story.
Your birth story? That's what you saw a post, and now you're basing our entire baby's life on a fucking Instagram trend?
Again, men trying to tell her what she can and can't do.
Let's not forget, this is my baby we're talking about too.
Then here at work, they're trying to use her physical body to gain a client.
It might not be a bad idea to let them know you're expecting.
Her physical body at work, at home, and in the doctor's office is trying to be exploited by
I
men.
mean, if you're not shown by then, we'll just plump you up with a pillow.
The second point, manipulating her communication and access to information, and how this affects self-agency. So the first and obvious point is that Dr. Hindle always surrounds himself with women nurses. Now, these women nurses serve a role. They are both yes women, as well as they create a sense of trust in the women that come in to see Dr. Hindle.
The internet is
This
full
clip
of
is an
misinformation.
example of
I don't want you getting
Dr. Hindle
paranoid.
trying to influence the information that she has access to, trying to be the sole giver of information. This clip is a nurse trying to say you shouldn't talk about this with other people, and then also trying to be the sole source of her information. Visit us
Feel free to call us
anytime.
anytime. Visit anytime you wish.
And then in this scene, she is being physically locked out of and kept away from information about her body. Within this safe she finds in her husband Adrian's office are all of the files surrounding her pregnancy, abortion, and everything himself and Dr. Hindle have collected.
Relax.
In this scene, her voice is just rendered mute.
See? Would you like to
She
watch?
says no, yet he makes her watch anyways. And so this leads to an important academic scholarly quote by Lisa Corrigan, which talks about how the language of consent is not the only way in which rape culture can be addressed or needs to be addressed. There are also hierarchies of power centered around property. And in this movie, the hierarchies of power are largely the healthcare system and marriage. The last point is delusion and gaslighting. When men cannot control what she says, what Lucy says.
I was only borrowing it. I'll bring it
They
back.
will control how other people interpret it.
Mommy brain.
This phrase, mommy brain, comes up many times. I included 3 clips.
Mommy brain, right?
Basically saying that if you're a pregnant woman, you don't have to be listened to because you don't know what's best for yourself. Taking away agency by their environment. Gabrielle O'Brien says, gender is a performance. Social structures. She talks about Judith Butler's work. And in this movie, you can see Lucy is constantly aware of the performance she has to give. And in a lot of the clips, especially in the next one. And this idea goes throughout the movie. When is this performance antagonistic to Lucy's health and self-agency? Equally as important is what is the performance others are expecting from her. In this next clip, her friend betrays her and gives away all of the documents she is collecting for the one and only mention of maybe a legal case, and then proceeded to be gaslit by somebody under Dr. Hindle's control. So let us conclude. There are 3 ways in which this film, False Positive, shows men exerting their power over women's self-agency within the legal rights afforded to them. The first is exerting power over women's physical body, which is done in a variety of ways throughout the film. The second is manipulation of their communication and the information provided to them. The third is through delusion and gaslighting and making their word mute. Now, did this film effectively show these 3 elements? That's up for debate. But Mathias Clasen highlights that most horror scholarship sees horror as depicting trendy subjects reflective of cultural conditions. However, it's important to remember that women's self-agency is consistently taken away from them worldwide, whether or not reproductive rights are trendy.